Could you please give us a brief introduction about yourself, perhaps regarding your education, as well as perhaps what really sparked your journey into becoming an educator?
Oh, okay. That is a very long story. Yeah, yeah. It's gonna have to be a short answer to a long story. I'm Stephanie Castle. I teach IB biology. I also teach chemistry. I have a little bit of physics background in secondary science, not at IB level. And I'm now on year 18 of teaching. And so my introduction to teaching was pretty unconventional, to be honest. I studied marine science at the University of Southampton, which in and of itself is an interesting path, since I originally thought I would do law. So there's a story we can dig into. But it was one of the final assignments that I had to do for my degree. And we did not submit things by email in that time, but I'm not that old. And so we put the paper assignment into the submission box, and there was a pamphlet there for Teach First, which is the UK version of Teach for America. It's a 2-year program where they take they take top graduates and they put them in the challenging public schools. And I thought that sounded like a pretty good challenge. And I went thinking I was going to do like a 2-year project and then go into leadership and business. And I found my calling, and the rest is history. Here I am 18 years later.
Yeah, so our second question would be, what specific subjects did you major in during college? So like, what are some classes that you took?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, because when people talk about marine degrees, often they talk about marine biology, which would make sense, me being an IB biology teacher. In fact, when I applied to study that degree, I specifically chose marine science because I didn't want to be boxed into one particular subject. So I actually did not take chemistry at A-level, the equivalent of IB. I was told it would be too hard for me. There's a story. So then when I went into my degree, the first thing that I really wanted to do is I really missed chemistry. I really had loved it. And so I went straight in for the chemistry 101 and just fell in love with it. I loved chemistry and bio and physics. I found an intellectual challenge. Like, that's not supposed to be a joke. Like, I actually enjoyed the intellectual challenge of it. It just wasn't my passion. So I did carry through biological oceanography, chemical oceanography, and physical oceanography, aka the physics, all the way through the 3 years of the degree. So I actually did all 3 sciences for 3 years. Even though most people think, oh, marine biology. No, I did all 3 of them. Yeah.
It seems like it's a really comprehensive kind of like a course load here. So was there one particular subject that you found most interesting out of these? I think you talked about chemistry, but I guess in comparison to something like biology, in which you are a teacher in, would you consider chemistry to be a bigger interest than biology, or would they be around?
No, not necessarily. No, I mean, I followed my passion through. That's why I became a bio teacher. But any bio student that lands in an AP or an IB class will know that they do not escape chemistry. The biology, to really understand it, you need to know the biochemical foundations in cellular structures. So having the chemistry background is fantastic to be able to explain things in depth and not just not just scratch the surface. If I have students that don't want to understand more, I can explain more because I have the chemistry background. And chemistry and biology, they go together very well, but they are different in their approaches. Chemistry tends to be a tad more like on the mathematical side of things, and biology tends to be much more kind of explanatory, and less of a, I guess from a student's point of view, less of a right answer all the time. Some students would disagree with that, but chemistry with its sort of mathematical approach, I think attracts itself to really sort of logical, mathematical, numeric thinkers, of which I also have a kind of an obsession with that stuff too. So yeah. So the two go together really well.
And so, what was it like studying college? Was it a enjoyable experience, or was it very stressful to major something in like marine biology?
I would do the whole thing again. Yeah. But I think that story goes back a little bit further. It's a story that I've told students in my classes before that may be worth sharing here, because if it inspires others too, is that I was basically, I was straight A's at GCSE, and I moved into my A-levels. Like I said, I was told not to take chemistry, so I had English literature on the cards with math and bio. And lo and behold, that came out AAC, and the C was English literature, which really says everything about me. Like, I was definitely the math science girl. But I had this thing where I had a law background, like in my family, and I thought, well, I'm a logical thinker. That would be a good idea. I apply for law. Now, any student applying in the UK will know that you apply for the degree. And so you declare your major. So I declared law. I went through the whole UCAS system that way. And in the spring, which would have been like just a little earlier than now, I had a complete meltdown as a senior. Having visited all the colleges and got all of my offers, I was like, this is insane. Why am I doing law? But to pull out of the UCAS system involves like an entire year off, which quite frankly, for any senior, is terrifying. Everyone else is going to college and you feel like you're a failure. And so that is like kind of a little mini crisis for a senior. And my response to my family was like, well, I don't know why you're worrying. You belong under the water, which I thought was the craziest response. What they meant was that they always knew that I loved the oceans and I loved science, and that they didn't understand why I didn't pick that in the first place. And so my point in telling this story is that a lot of the time we feel inclined to follow what other people think is best for us, or traditions that maybe in our family, which I'm not saying are not important. They have their place, but I am saying pay attention to your passion, because if you pay attention to your passion, you'll love every minute of studying, and your job will never be work. You won't work a day in your life, goes the saying, because you love what you do so much that it's not work. So I would go back and do my whole degree again. I loved every minute of it.
What was a particularly memorable experience during your time in college while you studied that you would like to share?
While I was in college, I personally really enjoyed the final year's dissertation, which actually interestingly mirrors probably some of my teaching style as well, because one of the hardest parts of IB Bio is internal assessment, but that's actually I love teaching the most. Mainly because it's the skills build, it's not so much the content. When I did my dissertation, I felt like that was the first time that I really had ownership over something. And I was trusted to design and conduct my own research, and I was trusted to write that up. And the plus at the end of that was that my supervisor ended up taking my work and writing it up into a published article. So my dissertation ended up making me a published science author at the end of my undergrad degree, which was awesome. It was like the biggest reward ever. But the idea that I had been able to design that, I had been able to invest in something so significant, especially something that ended up being published, and I was trusted to do that. And so sometimes it's hard for people to pursue projects that are, outside the box. But I think that mirrors itself in a lot of teaching that I do, is that even though you come across those moments where students may be really frustrated because you're not giving them the answer. In fact, what I'm trying to do is say, you know, I'm empowering you and I believe in you to be able to make suggestions, to evaluate those suggestions and choose a path forward. And, you know, the right answer may not always be the first one or the best. There might not be a right answer. It's just a best choice. And I think that learning journey is really only something that can be appreciated in hindsight a lot of the time. In the moment, it feels really frustrating. But in hindsight, it's like, oh, I see why that happened. I see where I grew, you know?
Yeah. So, what is something that you learned in college that helped you prepare for the real world? It does not necessarily have to be academics. It can also be like your extracurricular activities or any internships.
Well, I would say two things really. First one is that I probably learned the most in my life when things have gone wrong, not when they've gone right. That dissertation I told you about, my hard drive crashed about 3/4 of the way through and I had no backup. So that was like a small disaster in the moment and I thought it was the end of the world, but it wasn't, you know. The A-level C was like a disaster to me. I wanted 3 A's, why did I get a C? And, you know, it taught me something about myself. So I think there's too often we want everything to be perfect. We want everything to top scores. We feel like we're a failure if something goes wrong. And to learn to appreciate that failure is a part of your process. And that there's something to be learned in that, as tough as it may feel at the time, I think is a really important life lesson. That's one. The second one I would say is that pre-college, I actually wasn't particularly athletic, which surprises a lot of people now because I really enjoy running and coach track and things like that. But I joined the rowing team in college because my rationale was, who would have done rowing before college so we could all start as newbies? I didn't want to be someone who was really bad at the sport. But from that was the first opportunity I'd had to work in a team sport. And I think everybody in their life at some point should try to engage in a sport that involves others, even if it's not something that they do for their entire life. And even if that is, you know, making an individual contribution to a bigger team, for example, like a track team, you're doing your individual event, but it contributes to the success of the team. I think that ability to support others, to encourage them, to empathize with them, and to grow together with other people is also something really important for society, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What are some things you wish you would have learned in college before stepping out after into the real world?
I kind of feel this way about high school and college. I think that there are a lot of practicalities about living in society that unless you choose to specialize in them, you're kind of expected to know. So, for example, things like budgeting, financial management, investing, stock markets. I mean, I'm mentioning a lot of things to do with money, not because I'm money focused, but because it's an integral part of becoming an adult and living on your own. And I don't think that we ever really teach those things unless you go on and do like an accounting degree. And people just kind of expect you to know. And the only way that you learn that is if it's maybe passed down by your parents or your family, or you take a personal interest, or you go and do a financial degree. And I think like basics of financial management is something that we should include in high school and college, I think.
Yeah. So, what is some advice you would give to a high school student pursuing a career in science field, especially like biology or chemistry? So is there like
I'm not trying to quote our mission, but 100%. Like, I mean, there's a reason I work at our school because I believe in it. Like, follow your passions, no matter what. Even if people tell you no, stay true to yourself, because that is what is going to bring intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic. And be brave. Be brave. Even, you know, if you, for example, you know, sometimes we have women who are nervous about entering fields of physics. There's absolutely no reason to be. Sometimes we have people who want to go into areas of research officially, and people will say, oh, no one will ever fund that, or who would be interested in that? No one's interested except you. And story after story of scientists, scientific endeavor and discoveries are when people are brave and they continue to research, to look and study, even when other people say it's not possible or it's not worth it. Like, believe in yourself.
Yeah, for sure. What would you consider perhaps the most rewarding part of being a biology teacher and just being generally an educator at SAS, and as well as teaching a very rigorous academic program like the IB?
I'm going to go back to the previous point I made about like seeing failure as a part of progress. But I'm going to add to it, which is it's actually not got to do. I mean, of course, I want my students to learn biology. As I say this a lot, so I'm like, of course, I would like to learn that, but it's more important to me the personal skills that the students will leave with, that they could apply no matter where they are. And I think one of the biggest things when you're dealing with high school, any age group, quite frankly, but is young adults growing the confidence within themselves to move forward, irrespective of whether that step forward results in success or failure. And if it results in some perceived failure, that they're able to have the confidence to see that as an opportunity for their growth. And when that mindset is developed, you can see that transition into all walks of their life. It doesn't really matter whether they're studying biology or they're studying anything else. A joke that we had in my IB class this year was, hello, problem. And then we were like, we would welcome the problem in. And then we'd be like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? There was no fear to express that there was a problem. There wasn't a fear that it was a failure. And as soon as it stopped being me saying that, and it became the students saying that, even if it was a joke, I knew that then they were going, okay, well, I have to do is look for an opportunity to solve this rather than be scared that there's a problem. That is a huge internal growth, and that gives me so much joy.
I think that's like a really important quality of most scientists, really, just to learn from failure, right? Because ultimately, eventually you're going to have to test your hypothesis over and over again. And, it will fail, right? Your results might not be the ones you want, but eventually you would, if you tough it through, you probably would eventually make a breakthrough and just grow in that respect, right?
Yeah, and some of the biggest scientific discoveries were not the ones that people expected. So a lot of the time people carry out an experiment and they write their hypotheses and then they see it as failure if that doesn't, quote unquote, come true. But maybe it wasn't supposed to. And that's where the discovery is. Like, actually, you've been so successful. You found something different that no one else was able to observe. And that's why having that open mind to, things may not always go your way. And that includes scientific data and every other element of your life. And if you can be open to seeing when it doesn't, it's actually more of an opportunity. Huge growth there.
Yeah. Also, in contrast, to being the most rewarding part of teaching a rigorous program, what would be the most stressful part of your job?
Grades.
Mhm.
If I could throw out grades tomorrow, I would. I mean, my students would probably be horrified in the current, the current climate and the expectations of universities and so on and so forth. But if I had my way, I wouldn't hand out a grade at all. It's not to say that they wouldn't get feedback, because that's a different issue. Feedback leading to growth and development, self-reflection. That's what I think is most important. But we are consumed by grades. And I don't blame students in any sense, because they are pressured by the system above us, which is expecting certain grades. But I think it's a big area of significance in education to change the mindset from, assigning a number or a letter to a student, and instead talking about student growth and development, in more qualitative than quantitative terms, But that's terrifying to educators and teachers, honestly. Like, you have to provide them with confidence and develop the trust that they're still going to progress, even if they don't see a grade.
Yeah.
So the day that I can get through a year without handing a grade will be heaven.